Welcome to Early Access. I'm Katie Whitlock. I'm here with Andrew. Andrew, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, will you remind me, did you see the Instagram post that I had posted looking for guests? How did you find us?
Yeah, I think that's where I first saw it
Okay,
was
great.
was Instagram.
Okay, so I posted, for anyone who doesn't know, I posted an Instagram post when I first started this podcast and I needed people, anybody to talk to, because I wanted to stop bothering my family about it. And so I posted on Instagram, and Andrew was one of the people who responded. He has a very cool story. I'll kind of let you tell that, Andrew. If you'll tell the people kind of anything that you feel like is relevant about yourself, your experience in the Enneagram, what number you are.
Yeah,
Take it away.
absolutely. So, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. Like Katie said, my name is Andrew Bowles. First and foremost, I am a husband and a father. I've been married to my wife Braden for a little over 6 years now, and we have a 1-year-old son. His name is Theodore. We call him Teddy. He just turned 1 the other week.
Cute.
I lead with type 9. And I have known the Enneagram since 2011 when I was still in college. Suzanne Stabile was at that time still coming and teaching at Baylor University once or twice a year because she had some of um, her apprentices back when she did a 3-year
Mm-hmm.
apprenticeship program that were on staff at Baylor. And so they would bring her to campus. And so that's how I initially got introduced to it. I've been studying the system kind of ever since and been doing a lot of like really serious work with it for the last 7, 8 years. I've done cohorts with Suzanne, and most recently, starting in 2023 up through this summer, I did the professional certification program with the Narrative Enneagram, which
Mm-hmm.
is the school started by Helen Palmer and Dr. David Daniels. So I'm also a certified Enneagram teacher, and kind of professionally on the side, or professionally, I'm spent the last 4 years as a hospital chaplain and now still work in healthcare, but I do solely staff support, focus on staff emotional, mental well-being, and those
Yeah.
kinds of initiatives. And the Enneagram is my side hustle.
Cool. Same.
Yeah.
Well, we know how that goes. What does a hospital chaplain do?
So we provide any kind of spiritual or emotional support to patients, their loved ones while they're in the hospital. There's this bad misconception, especially in the South. So I'm in Texas, that chaplains are there just to deliver bad news, just
Mm,
to pray with people, or just to like evangelize.
yeah.
And I definitely don't do the third. And then like the bad news stuff, I can't deliver that because that's medical knowledge.
Right.
And so it's really just meeting patients and family where they are and just checking in, saying how are you? How can we support you? Because they've got so many people in and out of their room over the
Yeah.
course of the day that are just there for a brief amount of time, just what's going on. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And so having someone to sit there and process it with them is really kind of the bulk of our job.
What does chaplain mean?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Do you know what I mean? Is there a definition for it, or does it just not really work like that?
I'm sure there is, but it's also so broad because there's
Yeah.
chaplains in lots of different sectors. Like
Okay.
the other the other two most common are in the military and in the prison systems,
Mm.
but healthcare is the biggest one. And so there's not really like a solid like
Yeah.
definition of like a pastor is the one that leads and shepherds a church. We're there to provide spiritual and emotional care
Right.
to patients.
You're all out in the public, I guess would be the common theme. Like you're not in churches, you're going out to people. You are in the hospital or in the
Mhm.
prison or
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that.
I am an employee of a hospital as opposed
Okay.
to
Oh, okay.
someone that's on staff at a church and being like sent to a hospital. Like I'm on
Okay.
staff at the hospital.
Cool. Okay, I want to go back to Enneagram stuff.
Yeah,
Tell us about because I've never met anyone else who's done another cohort from Suzanne. So
yeah,
if anybody doesn't know, if you'll kind of tell them what the cohort program is, and then talk about the two that you did.
yeah. So Suzanne Stabile has a organization, a ministry called Life in the Trinity Ministry, and based in Dallas, Texas. And she has grown this program, as her own fame and notoriety has grown,
Mm-hmm.
to doing year-long cohorts where they are year-long intensives to learn the Enneagram, and then they've got a couple others which I'll touch on in just a second. But they meet for a long weekend 4 times a year, and it's just a lot of intensive teaching with a group of anywhere between 25 to 40. The Enneagram cohort's always closer to 40 or more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and learning all different aspects of the Enneagram. But honestly, one of the biggest components of it is the community that gets built within the cohort, because you learn a whole lot more from other people that that can share their experience as being someone of that type.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can hear someone like Suzanne beautifully describe all the other types, but like when she describes her experience as a type 2, it comes to life a whole lot more.
Yes.
That's why her teaching style is through stories and narrative. And so getting to hear the experience of other people saying, here's my life experience as a 6 or a 4, what have you, that's where it really starts to come to life.
Yeah.
So I did that in 2022. And then in 2024, I did a cohort with her husband, Joe, and one of her apprentices, Hunter Mobley, on the Enneagram and contemplative spirituality. And so Joe taught various contemplative spiritual practices, and Hunter taught aspects of the Enneagram. His big thing is vices and virtues, or
Mm-hmm.
passions and virtues. And he just wrote a book. Go buy it. And so yeah, I did that one in last year, 2024.
So I did Suzanne's in 2024. So I must have been doing Suzanne's while you were doing Joe's.
Yeah,
So I
must
did the
be.
Enneagram cohort with my mom. And then this year, actually just this past weekend, like I got back 2 days ago, was the last weekend of Joey and Billy Shuey's Enneagram cohort, which is Enneagram for the Modern World, which I don't know if anyone has ever had the chance to learn from Joey Shuey. She is fundamentally changing the game of the Enneagram. So if anyone is interested, sign up for their Enneagram for the Modern World. If anyone's interested from learning from Suzanne, sign up for Suzanne's Enneagram cohort. They're both beautiful. But the difference between, it's so interesting because they're both phenomenal teachers, right, in their own right. Suzanne and
Right.
Joey, and then Suzanne and Joe, and all
Hmm.
the family members, right? But it's so different. The cohorts are so different because they have different numbers. Suzanne's a 2, Joey's an 8. Obviously, that's going to be very different. Joe's a 9. That's going to
Hmm.
be very different, right?
Hmm.
What do you think were the biggest, like if someone's stuck between, do I want to do the Enneagram cohort or do I want to do the contemplative cohort with Joe? What would you tell them the biggest differences are
The first question I'd
besides topic, you know?
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say the first question would be like, what are you hoping to gain from a
Right.
cohort? And if it's more Enneagram focused, then obviously Suzanne's. But the some of the big differences are the approaches to teaching. So
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne's cohort, she says it's a lot of me. It's a lot of her teaching, pretty much all day, every day,
Mm-hmm.
for all 3 days, 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Um, Joe and Hunters, they kind of tag team the teaching, but it's also a little more experiential because they're talking about or teaching on these spiritual practices. If you've listened to Joe teach at all, he always teaches about centering prayer. And so we would do various contemplative practices throughout the year, both kind of encouraged on our own as well as during the cohort time. So there's a little bit more of a difference in how they approach it.
Right.
Joe's cohort tends to be a little bit smaller, and the way I described it, and one way to kind of think about it, is the contemplative cohort is very introspective.
Yeah.
It's what is my connection with God, the divine spirit, and what does that look like in a daily life? And then Hunter's piece of how does the Enneagram speak into that, versus Suzanne's that is very much Enneagram focused and
Right.
Enneagram education, if you will.
Right. Right. Cool. I agree with all of that. My mom is in the contemplative one this year.
Oh,
And
okay,
so
awesome.
she'll tell me a lot of the same things. Okay, let's talk about your number before we go on to the narrative Enneagram.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me how you knew you were a 9. Did you know right away, or did you ever struggle with any other numbers?
Yeah. So when I first heard Suzanne teach, granted I was 18, I thought I was a 5. I thought
Mm,
I led with 5, which they are both in the withdrawing stance. So there's aspects of similarities there, um, and a lot of nuance we probably don't have time to get into. But
yeah,
um,
they're very, very, very similar. I say 9 and 5s are cousins. I say
mhm,
3 and 8, 2 and 6, and 5 and 9. I've been taught to say are cousins. They all look very similar.
yeah. And so there was this withdrawing aspect that is true across both. But at the time in college, when she would describe the 5s as seeking information, loving systems, and figuring out how things kind of operate, and being kind of like a expert on one thing, a lot of those things really fit. And I love learning and studying things, and I was a great student. And so those behavioral aspects of 5 fit. But it wasn't until much later on, a couple years later, where I realized that the motivations for those behaviors and
Yes.
the withdrawing was different, which for anybody that's new to the Enneagram is what makes the Enneagram distinct from other personality assessments and tests. Is Enneagram's all about motivation,
Right.
and recognizing that the motivation was more conflict avoidance, peacekeeping, peacekeeping within the aspects of relationship and
Mm-hmm.
connection,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to differentiate the why behind the behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
and really understanding more of the nuances between 5 and 9, and the why is really what set it apart. I was like, okay, there's the key differentiator.
Yeah.
And when I first met my wife 8 almost 9 years ago, it was in that relationship aspect too, where she was able to help point out some of those differences too. As I introduced her to the Enneagram, she's like, yeah, no, 9 fits a
You
whole
are
lot
not.
more.
Yeah. 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 What number is she?
She leads with 6.
Okay. I love line. So my fiance is a 9 and I'm a 3. So I love
Oh,
it
yep.
when anybody can date anybody, but I love it when people pair up along the line. I think 5 and 9 is very interesting. I just had someone in one of the classes that I teach kind of be between 9 and 5. He didn't know
Hmm.
where he landed. And I think it's interesting because I think, like you said, they look so similar, but they
Yeah.
function so differently when you look
Hmm.
at how they function, what they're motivated by, just like you said. I think 5s, if anyone out there is also wondering, I think 5s care more about being right. I don't think they need other people to know that they're right, but the 5 wants to be right and know the right thing. And I think a 9 cares more about being liked. What do you think of that? Would you change any of what I just said?
That fits with the harmonic triads, which
Yeah.
is a whole component that we definitely don't have time to get into today. But 2 7s and 9s are all about this, having this positive outlook and
Mm-hmm.
maintaining this kind of silver lining. And especially for 2s and 9s, it's very relational. They're
Yeah.
probably the two most other focused numbers. And 5s in this one particular category join with 1s and 3s of wanting to make sure that they are competent, and
Yes.
that they are the the expert, the leader, whatever, in their field. And again, for different reasons, for different
Mm-hmm.
motivations, but definitely the 5 has that I want to be competent
Yeah.
aspect a whole lot more than the 9 does.
Yeah. I agree. I think I think 5s can engage. A lot of 5s have told me they also don't like conflict,
Mhm.
but I do think 5s like debate.
Absolutely.
And I don't even know if a 9 would even want to debate with you because it feels like fighting.
It depends on the topic, but yeah.
Yeah. What does it depend on? I mean, I know the topic, but like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so a whole host of things. So there's the aspect of like safety within the relationship of
Mm,
like who am I talking with. There is, at least for me, how knowledgeable do I feel about the topic. And so I want to, this is where there's some of that, I like the language of cousin aspect
right.
of five. I'm like, I want to be able to know enough to be able to engage in a conversation. But then this is where the nine has some unique aspects to it, is that I also have to know where I stand on the issue.
Mm,
I need to know what my viewpoint is and be able to articulate it and be able to articulate it clearly so that I can then have a healthy debate about said topic.
right. And is that difficult for you as a nine to know all those things?
It is. It's a lot to try to juggle because for even just like describing them, like that's a lot of like mental juggling of
Yeah.
things that are trying to go on all at the same time, which kind of taps into the stress line, the stress
Mm-hmm.
move to six, which takes me into my head already. So there's a whole lot going on when it comes to even just something like a debate.
Yeah. So talk a little more about that because this podcast is about just what it's like to be a certain number, right? This
Mhm.
first series that we're doing. So if anyone is listening and wants to know if they're a nine or needs to relate to nine or all the things, go deeper into that. What does that feel like? Like, what are you juggling? Because some people, when they enter into a debate, it does not feel like they're juggling anything. Like they're just talking, right? Like they already know what they want to say. They've
Mhm.
already thought about all of it. They don't need to sit down and think about their point of view because they already know their point of view.
Yeah.
So what? But I have heard my fiance will, if he was here, he'd say the same thing as you. It is hard for a nine to do that, right? So what
Mhm.
makes it hard? Why is it so hard for y'all?
Yeah. So to answer this, I feel like a little bit of context is needed
Yeah.
in that out of all nine types, the nine is the most self-forgetting of all nine. And what that means is we are the most likely to not pay attention to our own needs, our own thoughts, our own opinions, and to kind of set those aside to merge with the other, whoever the other is, if it's in relationship, in professional life, in conversation. And so it's really easy to set our thing aside and be like, yeah, I can go along with this. But the other part of that is nines are the type out again out of all nine that are the ones that are most easily able to see multiple sides of any given scenario. So if you are able to coherently, logically describe your position, I can be like, yeah, I see how you got to that. Internally, I may be like, I still disagree with you, but I see how you got there.
Right.
Um, and so that it's a whole lot easier to just kind of go along. And so when nines have this habit of continually taking the path of least resistance, it doesn't even have to be in debate, but just in life in general, always taking that path of least resistance, this merging with others, then you really start to lose your own sense of
Mm-hmm.
self. So, to get to your point, is when you get to a point of actually having to take a position, defend a position, hold a position, sometimes we can get to that point and be like, oh, what is my position?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we've taken the positions of other people so many times that when the spotlight is turned to us, we have no idea.
Yeah. Connect that to two for me because we also talk about twos ignoring their own feelings and their own wants and all the things. So in
Mhm.
your teaching, when you talk about that, what's the difference between those two things?
Yeah, so twos and nines are both others referenced. Twos focus on other people's needs, and nines focus on other people's agendas. So nines are looking at what are what are the agendas of other people? What are their wants, desires, motives, and then just kind of merging along with it. We still have our own thoughts and opinions if we do some digging. Every now and then it's right on the surface and we set it aside, but we still have those regardless. We put them aside and merge with other people.
Mm.
Twos act like they don't even have needs to begin with. They are so focused on the other, and there is more of the emotional connection that they think that if they don't have any needs, they don't have any wants, desires, then they have more capacity to give to other people.
Mm.
And part of this goes into the triads of twos, threes, and fours have this deep-seated sensitivity towards feeling unlovable.
Mm-hmm.
And for twos, they think that if they have needs, if they have to depend on other people, then somehow that makes them unlovable because they are supposed to be the ones giving to other people, and so it feels selfish to receive.
Right. I had a woman in my class a few weeks ago who was really, really struggling between 2 and 9 as
Mhm.
well. And one of the things I told her was that if you, I'll say this and then tell me your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I told her that if you, let's say you have a problem with a family member,
Hmm.
right? If in your mind any of your solutions to that problem include ignoring it, you might be more 9. And if none of your solutions include ignoring it, you might be a 2. Because 2s are so, they always want to be doing something, I find, for the other person or fixing the problem or fixing the relationship. I very rarely find a 2 who will just let the relationship exist at this lower level as long as they don't have to fight about it, right? What do you think about that? Would you change any part of that? Would you have told her something different?
That's an interesting way of putting it because it's like, okay, how are they going to handle the problem? And I think it partially depends on like, okay, what kind of problem are we like dealing with? Is it like a relational problem? Does the other person have a need that needs
Yeah.
doing? But if someone were struggling between 2 and 9, I would say like, how often is it guided by emotion?
Mm.
Like how much is the focus on connection and the emotional connection with the person, with their needs, like with the kind of the tone and that feeling of the relationship versus for a 9, it's like, okay, where do you like feel this? Where do you feel this conflict kind of in your body? And like what is the initial feeling of like, okay, what do I feel like is going to happen? Like, do I feel like I need to do something? Does this issue with the family, does it feel conflictual and make you want to run and hide? Does it make you feel like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever they want because they seem to be more quote unquote important or
Right.
those kinds of things. So
Right.
that would probably be how I would differentiate it. And oftentimes those things for me get exposed a whole lot more in conversation,
Yeah.
which I'm certain is kind of what that led to because it gets down to that motivation of you could have these lists of behaviors and
Right.
put it in a book and someone could read that and be like, well, I do both. So
Right.
that's why I think the style that like Suzanne teaches or the narrative Enneagram teaches through panels. So having like a panel of 9s and a panel of 2s and having them share their
Cool.
experience, that's where I feel like it really differentiates itself from written text.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. I'm very interested in that. I've never
Yeah.
done a single thing with the narrative Enneagram. So you kind of told us about it already, but if you could again just tell us kind of what it is and where it comes from. And then I'm interested why you chose that one because there's a lot of Enneagram stuff out there. There's a lot
Hmm.
of people teaching Enneagram. So why
Yeah.
did you pick the narrative one?
Yeah. Answer the first one first.
Mm-hmm.
So the narrative Enneagram started in the late 80s, early 90s with Helen Palmer and Dr. David Daniels. Helen Palmer is one of the kind of originators of modern Enneagram teaching. She wrote the first Enneagram book that actually got published. And she and a few others, A.H. Almas, Sandra Maitri, I believe Don Risa, but I'm not positive, all learned from Claudio Naranjo.
Mm-hmm.
And so she then started this school called the Narrative Enneagram with Dr. David Daniels, who was a professor at in Berkeley, and they started teaching with this panel method of saying like, okay, we're going to teach a little bit about a type, but we really want to hear from people who are those types and what their experience is, and let them bring the type to life, if you will. And so they started their school. They then started doing, what was it called? I can't remember what it was called, but it was another acronym of
Something.
yeah, of teacher training and certification and things like that. And then it has evolved over the years to the professional certification program where they teach Enneagram teachers and Enneagram practitioners on how to teach through the narrative method. And so the reason I chose them for my certification and continuing professional education was because I thought that if I'm going to invest that amount of time, energy, resources into a certification program, I want to get as close to the original source as
Yeah.
possible.
Oh, yeah.
And part of me was like, I want to learn from like the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative was the first um, certifying school that was accredited by the International Enneagram Association and was the first one that got the accreditation with distinction uh, marker with IEA. And that whole process just took my experience of the Enneagram and just like blew it up in in a perspective mindset of like it just completely broadened it
Yeah.
as I got to know teachers and practitioners from literally around the world, but also hearing other teachers teach it and getting more experience with other teachers
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely phenomenal.
So I'll tell a story and then I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things I tell people on like the first day that I'm talking about my classes a lot. If they come to class, like one of the first things I tell them is, listen, you can learn maybe 30% of everything you need to know about the Enneagram from a teacher, from a podcast, from resources that you read, anything like that. The rest of it is going to come from you listening to other people talk about their type. And
Mm-hmm.
not even talk about their type, but just talk as their type. Like
Yep.
listening to what a 7 talks about and how they say it and what they're not talking about and what they're not valuing and what they are about, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
That is where that's where my language for it is, that's where it puts the Enneagram into your bones a little bit, because you start to see it in people instead
Mm-hmm.
of just knowing kind of fun facts or trivia about yourself or about other people because they're this number, ha ha ha.
Right.
You start to read it in people. My friend just asked me the other day, because his brother and his brother's fiance are getting, what are they getting? Like a master's of some clinical something. They're going to be counselors. They're going to be
Okay.
like mental health counselors. And he was wondering, he's like, I was talking to them about it, and now I want to ask you, when you learn this much about how people think, do you start to see people like, do you start to see people as their number? Like people who you've never talked to, once they start talking to you, do you start to pick up on little things that kind of make you think that they might be this number or not? And I was like, yes. Like right away, there are some things that you can notice about people, right? That is not me saying, dear listeners, that you should go out and start typing people. But my point is, when you start listening to other people talk about their type, like on a panel, then you can hear it out in the world. You hear it in other people in a
Yeah.
way that you do not pick up just from like learning about
Right.
the Enneagram. You know
Right.
what I mean? So here's my question for you. I have a lot of questions, but I want to talk about 9 first. How did that experience change your perception of being a 9?
The experience of going through the certification program?
Yeah, the narrative Enneagram. How did meeting all those people and doing the panels and all the things, how did that broaden 9 for you?
That's a good question. And one of the things that I would say to kind of echo the point you made is like, I am continually learning about the nuances of
Yes.
type
Yes.
as I continue in not only my education of the Enneagram, but also in my professional work with it. So there's that aspect of it. But with 9ness in particular, and in my experience of being someone who leads with 9, is taking this aspect of self-forgetting that I talked about earlier
Mm-hmm.
and kind of turning it on its head a bit. And for me, it's about waking up to myself and recognizing that I personally have something to add to this world, this
Yes.
conversation, this discussion on the Enneagram, because of this very reason that we're talking about, that every expression of the type is unique. And so it's not negating myself,
Mm-hmm.
not saying, there's nothing special about me. Anybody could do this, whatever, but really claiming my space in this work of saying, I'm not deficient.
Mm.
And I have this capacity to teach the Enneagram. Like,
Yes.
I went through this process, and that's something that I've had to claim in myself recently as I've done several things professionally. It's like, no, those are big deals. Like, this was a big
Yes, they are. Yeah.
investment. It is a big
Yeah.
deal. And so being able to claim that for myself, as opposed to saying, anybody could do this if
Right.
got the time and money, anybody could do that. But it took a lot of work.
So, like I said, my fiance's a 9 and my sister's a 9. And one thing that happens when you love a 9 is that you find yourself convincing them over and over that they do have something to say. And it's not just that they have something to say, because sometimes I think the anger of a 9 can make them realize that, but that also that it's like your job. It is up to you to say it, right? Because you 9s have such a beautiful way. You have the objectivity of a 5. Like I said, you observe, you are tapped into people in a way that's very, very all encompassing. But you also have the relational aspect that a 5 doesn't, to be able to tell that to people in a way that doesn't make them mad, right? So
Right.
you see things in this beautiful, objective way, and then you have enough relational skills to be able to translate that into the real world. And other people don't carry those two things in the same way that a 9 does, right? And so not only, I get passionate about this because I love my fiance and I love my sister, and I think they have a lot of good things to say. Like, not only do you have a lot of good things to say, it is actually your duty as a person to say them, right? Because otherwise we're missing out on 1/9 of everything that happens, you know? I always tell 9s, like, you just need to talk more, because I promise you that you have something good to say, and it will affect the world, you know what I mean? And the thing that 9s do then is they say it once, and then if it gets skipped over, they never say it again. And I think the hard part for 9s is to keep going. Like, if you do know you have something important to say it multiple times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Friends, this is Jeff. Second half of this conversation is posted on the Early Access podcast feed, and the link is in the show notes. While you're there, do hit subscribe. Katie's podcasts are going to post regularly on Tuesdays as she goes around the circle. If you start up the conversation, it's at minute 35, so just skip ahead a little bit. You'll pick up right where you left off, and may all good things be yours.